Hello, my name is Grace Sharma, and this is a webinar about how to switch to online Orton Gillingham tutoring during this time when things have changed a lot. So going through the learning targets I'm going to be hitting in this webinar. First, I'm going to do about 15 minutes giving you an overview of what online tutoring looks like with Orton Gillingham and what tools, how I got into it, the pros and the cons, benefits, things like that. Then I'm going to go into what you need in your toolkit in order to start tutoring online and shift into that. That'll be about 30 minutes. Then I am doing a demonstration with one of my colleagues where we'll show you actually using the tools that we use, with her kind of acting like a student and showing us what would happen if a student has some challenges or makes some errors and how we can correct those using these online tools. And then if you do decide that you're interested in using the tools that we use, the last part, part 4, is where we're going to really get into how to use this specific platform that we use with our online tutoring. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, it's the online overview, the overview of online Orton Gillingham tutoring. Again, my name is Grace Sharma. I am a fellow in training with the Academy of Orton Gillingham. And I have been trained by both Cindy Schultz and Karen Leopold. Those are my fellows. I want to go ahead and from the beginning give you a disclaimer that everybody does Orton Gillingham a little bit different. So I'm not saying my way is the right way or the only way. This is just how I've either been trained or through going to different conferences or working with different colleagues, how my own tutoring style has evolved. Again, I totally respect everybody, how you have been trained, what your fellows say, but I'm just trying to give you what I've learned in how to implement Orton Gillingham the most efficiently online. Again, I also want to say thank you to Keely Rincon. She is one of my colleagues that works with me doing online tutoring. I also have Diane Mayer and Lynn Lamping to thank as well, who have also helped put a lot into this presentation, help me bounce ideas off of them as well. So how did I get into online tutoring? This entire thing actually kind of just happened out of necessity. So I used to live in Columbus, Ohio. I had multiple students that I was working with there. And 2 of my students in particular, we had worked together a long time and they really wanted to keep working with me. And even though they were looking for other tutors in the area, they weren't able to find tutors that either didn't have a waiting list or were in a distance that it was possible for them to be able to go and see them twice a week. So while I was still living in Ohio and talking about, you know what, this summer I know I'm going to be moving to California, my students said, hey, is there any way that you can do online tutoring? It just happened that I had gone to an academy conference recently, and I had heard one of the founding fellows mention that she does online tutoring. And I went, you know what? Some people are doing that. Let's see what happens. Luckily, I also have a husband in technology. And so he helped me figure out, while I was still sitting in Ohio with my students, what do we need to get into place before I did make the move out here to California. So a lot of this was a necessity thing. When I typically tell tutors when they want to switch online, a lot of the time I tell people to kind of try and duplicate that same thing. Start doing online tutoring sitting right next to your student. Although right now we're in a really unique situation where everybody is sheltering down, and we can't do that. So that's why I decided to make this webinar for you and help show you those kinks that we worked out while I was still sitting in place, or even in the years since then. I've been doing Orton Gillingham tutoring since 2013. I've been doing online Orton Gillingham tutoring for the last 3 years. And through that, all the time, I'm constantly seeing what other practitioners are doing and going, you know what, that's a great thing that I can add to my practice. Or sometimes my students, just out of necessity, I go, okay, what's a different way that I can present this to you online so that you understand what I'm trying to teach you, even though I can't be sitting right next to you with some manipulatives that we typically might rely on in a lot of our Orton Gillingham tutoring. So when you are going into online tutoring, there are some different factors you want to keep in mind. One of the things I always tell my parents is I can't guarantee that online tutoring is the right fit for every single student. So far, it has been a good fit for all of my students, even by my very young ones, and especially since this whole lockdown with the coronavirus. I had a couple students that we still hadn't transitioned to online. We were concerned. They had a lot of attention issues and everything. And now we don't really have an option, and we've been able to make that switch successfully. You are constantly having to kind of be on your toes and sometimes recreate how you present the content. And I'll show you multiple ways later in part 3 of this of how you can do that. But the student factors that I do keep in mind are the student's age and maturity, their attention span, the severity of their dyslexia, and their comfort with technology. Having said that, I have students that I've started working with as young as first grade, and I have students all the way up to high school. We have worked, Keely and I work with students in all different states and even different countries. So right now I have a student in London. We are working with a student in Costa Rica. And then we also have students in multiple states like Seattle or Seattle, Washington, Oregon. We have students in Florida, Georgia, all over the US. You do have to keep in mind the time difference there, but it is possible to do that. And then the other thing that you want to consider is making sure that a student and yourself have access to what I call a technology toolkit. And a lot of these items you guys probably already have around. And we're going to get into that more in just a little bit. There are benefits and some challenges to online tutoring. Some of the benefits that a lot of my students appreciate is that it's convenient. I live in the Bay Area, kind of right between San Francisco and Stanford, which means that traffic here is really busy all the time. And you never really know what is going to happen with your commute. So a lot of my students, even if they will come work with me in person sometimes, there are some days and times, especially if they're going to hit rush hour, where they do have to jump online with me because otherwise they might be sitting in traffic for a long time. So in that way, it makes it convenient. The other thing that makes it convenient too is I've got some students that work a lot better early in the morning, they're early birds, and so I'm able to jump online with them before school. And when I first was asked about doing that, I was like, I don't know, it's probably going to be too early for them. But what I've found is a lot of my students go, oh my gosh, it's so great because I know that I am going to be successful at something, because in Orton Gillingham, right, we're working to make sure the student feels successful. And so they love starting their day on that positive note and then heading to school, because a lot of my students, maybe school is a little bit more challenging for them for sure, right? And so it kind of gives them that good positive start to their day. It also can be very stress reducing for the student. They're staying at home in a comfortable spot, although you do have to keep in mind a challenge with that is making sure that they're not in a spot that's too comfortable. So I definitely have my students sitting at a desk or a table when they're working with me, not sitting in a bed, because it's obviously easy. Yes, we do tend to work in bed sometimes. as adults or as kids, they tend to do things sitting in bed or on a couch or on the floor or somewhere like that. It just becomes too easy for them to kind of start to slump down and lose that focus. So we do want them to be in a comfortable spot, but also in a spot where they're able to sit up tall and focus and work with us to the best of their ability. I mentioned already, it does give you as a tutor a farther reach physical, with your physical location. Like I said, we've got students all over the United States and even now into other countries. The other great thing about that too is that my husband actually has family in London and India and Australia. So a lot of the time we might go to visit family and be there for a week or two visiting family, but I'm still able to carry on with my students by opening up some times. And as long as I have a Wi-Fi connection and I take this technology toolkit that I'm going to explain in a few minutes with me, then I've actually tutored from Tasmania, I've tutored from London and from different countries like that while I'm on vacation or visiting family without having my students have to wait for me to get back. Online tutoring is very intuitive for the generation nowadays. What we do find a lot of the time is the first few sessions, the students might not know how to work with this technology and might need help from an adult to begin with, but then really quickly they pick it up, and then a lot of the time they'll show me new tools that have either come through with the updates or things like that, where they're like, hey, did you know you can do this? And I'm like, no, I didn't. So they start to pick this up pretty well. And the students really love working on these online whiteboards because they do have a lot of different options. And they think it's pretty cool that they get to work with a teacher one-on-one who's live and interacting with them, but is also through the computer. A few of the challenges that you do want to keep in mind, though, is that sometimes student behavior is a little bit harder to manage. Attention is a little bit harder to keep when you're talking to a student through the computer. Because of that, I definitely recommend that my parents are sitting with the student at least for the first few sessions, so that if they accidentally bump something on the iPad and lose their visual of me, or bump something and all of a sudden they aren't in that whiteboard anymore, the parents sitting there, and usually it's a quick, easy fix with that as an adult we just know, click back on your browser, your Safari, and pop back into that link, or go back to your email and touch the link one more time to bring that back up. So I do definitely recommend to have a parent there at the beginning for all of my students. For some of my students that are younger, we do recommend also continuing having that parent next to them, because sometimes they can move manipulatives around next to them that they might need to move, and have a little bit more of a physical presence with them. Another challenge that you can have is location distractions, especially right now with everybody sheltering in home, right? You might have some other siblings that are doing things in the background. So you just want to make sure that parents understand. We want to try and make sure it's a quiet spot where they're sitting, and we try to minimize those distractions as much as possible. Obviously, we can't control all of them, but you just want to be aware of doing that and setting yourself up for success there as well. Another challenge is that digital handwriting is a new skill for a lot of us, and especially a lot of kids, because yes, they work on these touch screens a lot, but maybe they haven't ever used a stylus on a touch screen. And it is a different type of skill. You have to keep your hand up. You can't let it fall down, because then you've got those two touch points, and the computer is either, or the touch screen is either going to kind of pop and move your screen, or it might make a line that you don't want. So a little bit of it is, especially at first, teaching your student, oh, it's okay, it moved on you, just keep your hand up. And so it's kind of floating off of that touch screen. This is a little bit less of an issue if a student has an Apple Pencil, but a lot of my students don't have Apple Pencils. And I'll give you a link as well for this other stylus that I recommend. It's a Miko stylus. It's about $15 on Amazon. You get a set of 2 along with extra tips. And it's got 2 different kinds of tips here. And so a lot of my students use this. Some of them will even use other styluses that they've gotten from other places. So it doesn't have to be one specific thing. Talking about local distractions, there's my dog sleeping, and apparently she's chasing something in her dream. So sometimes you do have these little sound distractions, and sometimes it makes the kids laugh, gives them a quick brain break, and you move on. Some other things to keep in mind is you can occasionally have technical glitches. What I have found is more and more, those have become far more infrequent for me. But I do always have students have a pencil and paper nearby just in case maybe it's cloudy that day and the Wi-Fi just isn't connecting really well or something like that. Or maybe they're updating an app you're using. So you just want to make sure you have some extra things, and I've got a slide about that as well, just giving you some info about extra things we always keep on hand so you're instantly ready to flip and overcome those glitches. And then, yep, you do have, there's a bit of a learning curve like I mentioned, but the students do tend to pick that up pretty quickly. And one of the things I'm going to do too, once I put this webinar out, you can continue to check back. My website is empoweredreaders.com. You see my logo down there at the bottom right. And I'm going to start trying to create some different tools for you as teachers. So maybe a forum where we can all talk about, because I know I'm not the only one doing this, and there's lots of people with really great ideas out there that I even am like, oh, definitely, that looks like something I would like to layer onto what I'm already doing. So I'm going to try and get that put together as quickly as possible to help you out with that. Maybe do some little bursts or blogs or video blogs here and there to continue to support you however I can. All right, now we're getting into what is the toolkit that you need for online Orton Gillingham tutoring or online tutoring of any kind, probably. So there are really 6 essentials of the online toolkit that we always talk to our parents about, and that I always make sure are in place. That needs to be internet connectivity, that you need a video conferencing software, a touchscreen device, and typically that's going to have a front-facing camera or a second device with a front-facing camera. An audio accessory with a built-in mic is a plus, but not a must. A stylus is useful, and then a real-time interactive online board is that last piece that we find really helps make this a very interactive experience. So internet connectivity, really, as long as you and the family have a good Wi-Fi connection that isn't laggy, then you're going to be fine. And I think most of us nowadays do have that. We do recommend Wi-Fi just because a lot of the time I use an iPad as my touch screen, and that connects with the Wi-Fi. And then a lot of the time the students are also using some sort of device that connects with that Wi-Fi as well. The other good bonus of that as well is some of our students actually will have a parent meet them at the school, and they will work there at the school with their tablet and just be able to jump on that Wi-Fi also. Or I've actually tutored from hotels before when I'm traveling for work conferences or such. And so it just makes it so that wherever there's a Wi-Fi connection, you can jump on. That being said, you do want to keep in mind or notify parents that sometimes our Wi-Fi might be a little bit overtaxed depending on what else is happening in the home. So I know some of my students, depending on their Wi-Fi speeds, they can't have maybe another sibling that, or two siblings, you know, streaming a video game during tutoring. So sometimes we would find that we had to say, okay, for this 1 hour, maybe find something else that you can do. It might be people aren't streaming like movies or things like that as well. If that's all pulling that Wi-Fi and kind of bogging it down. A lot of homes, that's not an issue, but if you do notice that there's a lag for some reason all of a sudden, then check and see who else might be pulling on that bandwidth. You also can use laptops and desktops with a wired or wireless connection, but the thing there is that they may not be touch screens. So whatever tools you decide to use, it's not that you need to go out and buy something new. You can often, a lot of the time, we already have these devices for them to use, and you just decide, is it something that's going to connect to Wi-Fi or connect with a cord, and just make sure it has that reliable connection. As far as video conferencing software, there are so many options out there. And I know there are a lot of online tutors that are using lots of different options. I personally use a few different options. I typically use FaceTime just because most of my families already have Apple devices, and I'm completely an Apple device person. So then it's a lot easier for me to just jump on a FaceTime with them. However, some of my families don't have Apple devices. And so in that instance, I often will use a Zoom, which I know right now they've released it to educators now for free. So that's a great thing for you to be able to use. I also know some tutors that use GoToMeeting as well and find that useful for their tutoring needs also. I do have one student that I work with in Google Hangouts, but it can be a really hit or miss situation for some reason. And so I don't necessarily recommend that one, but it is something you can use if a student doesn't have any device and you don't have a Zoom account or a GoToMeeting account. It is something that you can use. I just sometimes have to call them back, or sometimes I can't rely on that to have the very best sound quality, which we definitely want to try and shoot for that. I've never used WebEx meetings myself, so I can't really speak to that. And then as far as Skype, I used to use Skype a lot because my husband and I actually lived in different states for about 3 years before, and even right the first year we were married. And it used to be very reliable, and I'm not sure what's happened, but that has become a little bit more laggy and a little bit less reliable. So I don't know, they might be going through an update, or maybe it's just the area I'm in, it's not really working right now as well. So it might work perfectly for you. But as far as my experience and my colleagues' experiences, I typically recommend FaceTime, Zoom, or GoToMeeting as the easiest ones that have the most reliable, consistent connection. And also, if you are working right now on your practicum for Orton Gillingham, as a lot of people are, right? You are also able to record through like Zoom or GoToMeeting and then submit that observation to your fellow. Again, not trying to change the way that you guys work. A lot of my mentees, because I am a fellow in training with Karen Leopold, so I am training teachers, and a lot of them are submitting their observations to us via video. And so just one other thing that you can think of that might be able to tag on here as well. The third piece in your online tutoring toolkit is a touchscreen device with a front-facing camera. Now, this could be one device or it could be multiple devices. It just depends on the setup and what devices are already there. The reason we say it needs to have that touch screen is because that really facilitates the ability to use the real-time whiteboard, which is how we collaborate really well and smoothly. And the next section is where I'm going to show you a demonstration of what that looks like and how you can interact in different ways using the platform that we use. Like I said though, so I have all my students use different ways of doing this. Some of my students have either their parents' iPhone or their iPhone or even their iPod that has video, and they have that as their video that's recording with me. In that case, a lot of the time, some of them will prop it up with books, but I also have found they have lots of little different almost like an easel or a holder that you can buy for like $5 on Amazon. Or you could use, I mean, we're teachers, you could use teacher tacky, the silly putty kind of stuff, and stick that in front of it so that it helps it prop up and stand up against something, so that it's angled so you can see them. Another way that you can do it for that video is it could be their computer is the video that's recording. That's how I actually do all of my video, is through my laptop, and then I have my iPad on the side. I do have a few of my students who are able to do both on the same device, and typically when they're doing that, that's an iPad. And in that case, they are FaceTiming me on the iPad, and it pops me into a small little box in the corner when they don't need to see me. But these are students typically that are older, and so they know when they need to see me in their lesson, or I can say, hey, make the screen big so you can see me, and they'll pop it out to that full size again. But otherwise it just is staying in the corner, and they can drag and move that around so it's not in the way of the whiteboard that we're working on together. But that video camera is definitely really key, because that enables you to have that real-time visual connection between you and the student. Like I said, a lot of the devices that I use and that my students use are Apple devices. I don't have them go out and buy new devices. It's just because they already own those devices. Some of my students also do use Android devices as well, and those work. We just have to go to one of those different platforms besides FaceTime. Some people do use Windows machines. I can't think of any of my students right now that are doing that necessarily, so I can't really speak to the quality of how that works. Kindle Fire is a new device that's out there that you could possibly use. The problem is it's a proprietary system, and so I can't really speak to how it's going to work as far as staying up to date and being able to give you that consistent quality. And none of my families have one of those. So, you know, so one of you might be able to contact me and say, yes, we use a Kindle Fire and it works perfectly. And then I can change my my opinion there. I just can't tell you much about it. One other note to keep in mind is that what I have found is even one of my students that has a first generation iPad mini, it is able to stay with them and update and work perfectly with all the platforms we're working, and we've never had a problem with it. Every once in a while, if you do notice a problem suddenly, a lot of the time it's that there's a new update that the student just needs to update their iPad. Now, that being said, with Android devices, I have had in one or two instances where someone had a Android device that was maybe 10 years old or something like that, and because of the hardware, it just wasn't able to update and do it, because those devices don't seem to really update as well. Now, again, I'm not in technology, my husband is, but he said that's what it sounds like is the issue. So I would say if they're using an Android device, it probably needs to be a newer Android device, at least maybe within the last 5, maybe 10 years, but over that, you could run into some problems, and it also probably isn't going to have as good of a touch screen once we get into that piece of the toolkit. The fourth piece of our toolkit is an audio accessory. Now, right now, I'm not wearing my headset, but a lot of the time, I do wear my headset for our students, and a lot of the time, they wear a headset as well. So you don't have to go out and buy anything. Again, I'm an Apple person, so I have just the regular old ones that headset that came with an Apple device. But some of my students have AirPods they use now. Those work perfectly fine. Some of them have the cool new, you know, what are those, Beats. Some of them have the video gaming ones you can see there on the right. Any of these work fine as long as it reliably connects to whatever they're video conferencing on. And it can be even little, just little cheap non-name brand ones. The only thing there is that you just need to make sure it has a nice audio quality. I think for the most part, most of them do now. But yeah, it is helpful, especially with some of the students that have those more severe phonological awareness issues, for them to hear it. Another tip I have typically is when I'm using these, I won't through the entire lesson, but when I'm doing phonemic awareness in particular, and it's a student that I know is having trouble with that, which a lot of our dyslexic students do that, I will actually hold my mic up here. And so that actually helps. Now I do check. Some of the kids, depending on their device, say this is a little too loud, please don't hold that up there. So check with them and see. But some of the students I say, does it sound better when I do this? And they do appreciate that, especially during those phonemic awareness times. Again, I don't hold it up there during the entire lesson though. Some people have asked me, does it need to be noise canceling? No, I don't even know that any of my students use noise canceling headphones, and those can get really expensive. So I would say you don't really need noise canceling. If they happen to have one that's noise canceling, it's not going to hurt them. Just make sure that it is compatible with whatever they're using for video conferencing, and it's reliable too. I actually have one student who has rabbits as pets, and sometimes they'll chew through them, and all of a sudden she's not getting all of the audio. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Some of the times I tell the students that whatever their accessories are, their audio accessories, their stylus, all those things maybe need to stay in one spot and maybe in a safe case depending on what kind of pets or if they have younger siblings. So for instance, I keep all of my tools right here on my desk, so they're ready to travel with me. And this is just a little cheap, not device holder that holds my different tools here, my Apple Pencil and everything. So I have those ready and right there with me for tutoring. Okay, so I mentioned the stylus, and I mentioned this one in the last segment as well. I do have myself an Apple Pencil that I use, but if my Apple Pencil isn't nearby or it might be dead or something like that, I also have this stylus, which is Miko brand. You can see it's upside down. Miko brand. Nope, I was right side up there before. The fun of cameras. All right, so this is a Miko brand. Again, you can look at it on Amazon. I'm not getting any money for any of the devices or the platforms or anything I'm suggesting. I'm just saying what works for me with my students. And again, this stylus has two different ends. My younger students tend to kind of like this end. My older students tend to like this one. It's has a little bit more precision, but the younger ones, this is kind of something they like to play with, and it doesn't necessarily last as long. The great thing about the Miko though is that when you buy it for about $14, $15 on Amazon, it actually comes with two of these, and it also comes with the extra little nibs. You can see there in the picture, it has 2 to 4 of these extra tips, so that then if one does break, the student just takes it off and then swaps it out for that new tip. And again, if a student does happen to, or a parent happens to have an iPad Pro, here's an Apple Pencil. This is the older version. There's a newer version as well. This is a lot more pricey and not a must at all. So again, look at what they already have. Some of them even have little glittery styluses that they use that they've gotten, I don't know, from a toy store or something like that, where I've seen them use those and they work. So it's just about working to teach them how to use that stylus, and then letting them know that none of our handwriting probably is going to look as neat on a touch screen as it does on a piece of paper, just because of the modality there. Then this is the last piece that I feel like has really made a huge difference for me as a tutor. And this is the part that we worked through, looking through a lot of different options to make sure that we had this piece in place and it was a good, reliable tool. For us, my husband and I, when we started looking at this stuff, I said, oh, he watched my lesson and went, okay, what do you really feel like you need in order to be the best tutor and to keep that multisensory piece in your lesson? Because I didn't want my lesson and my student, the quality of my instruction to suffer just because I wasn't sitting next to the student. So what we looked for was, I said, whatever it was, it must be, for me, interactive. For me, I said it must allow real-time annotation on something that I've already preloaded. Just like when we're sitting next to a student, we'll have like pages that we're printing out and putting in front of them. And that they're writing on and we're writing on maybe. I needed to be able to do that digitally. I also said I wanted it must allow both of us to interact and to see each other's work. To me, I felt like it must allow me to have multiple pages because I put multiple pages in front of my student for those different parts of our lesson. For me, I felt like it needed to be broadly compatible across many different devices so that I wasn't having to force my students to buy a new device, and so that I wasn't saying, oh, if you don't have a device like this device, then I can't work with you. And then also, I really wanted it to make it so I could save my student work for those records at the end of the session. The tool that we found after we looked through all of these different tools, because there are a lot of them out there, was AWW app, which is a whiteboard or a web whiteboard. And so that is the tool I've been using since I moved to California in 2017. And it's very reliable for me. They continue to update it with different things, and it checked off all of these boxes for me. So that's the one that I use. I'll get into more about that later. I don't want to bog you down with it right now at this moment, because I don't know if it looks like it's going to be what you need. Like I said, these were my musts as a tutor for me. But you might say, you know what, I'm just doing this during the lockdown. I don't have to have all of those pieces. And in that case, you don't need to necessarily use this online whiteboard. I know lots of tutors that are using things like Zoom, and they're using, there's an interactive notebook that they use, and it has some benefits too that mine doesn't necessarily have. So I saw one tutor where she is able to download those foundation tiles and make it so the students can kind of drag those around. And right now I don't have that capability in a web whiteboard, but I get around that using a lot of other things. So yeah, there's all different options. Scribbler is another one that we looked at, and it was a close second. We ended up with going with AWW, and kind of have, because it's been working really well with me, that's what I've stuck with. Like I'm saying, it's not just this one. So that's why I want to let you know what I was looking for, what I felt was really important, and why I went with AWW. I will say that I have been tutoring since 2013. In Ohio, I had 5 to 10, I think 10 students by the time I moved away from Ohio, and had been doing it for many years there. And I saw the progress that my students made in person. I now have about 15 students that I work with, and all of those, except for 1 or 2, are either completely online or partially online. And I've been doing it for 3 years. And with those students, I've seen the same amount of progress, the same engagement that I have seen when I was working with my students in person. So There are things that you need to work around. There's a bit of a learning curve, but hopefully what's going to happen with this webinar is that you're not going to have as much of a learning curve, because I'm going to go ahead and teach you. Here are some things that I've learned in my practice and how I've integrated them so that you already know how to do that. I didn't have anybody that, if you do decide to do a WW app, when I decided to do that, there was nobody to explain what the different tools were. So there was a really steep learning curve for me there, where I was figuring out, how do I even upload things into this, and how do I even, what do these different tools mean? And if you do decide that these musts are what you want in your practice, and that AWW app is something that you want to use, stay online for the very end of the webinar, and I will go through that so that you can go, okay, now I know what steps I need to do to just go ahead and get started with this tool. And I know there's somebody that's vetted it. And again, I'm totally offering my services wherever I can. If you want to reach out, my contact info is going to be on the very end of the slide, or you can go to my website at empoweredreaders.com and contact me, and I'm going to continue to do whatever I can to help build this community and help support you as an online tutor, just based on what I've already learned, trying to share and help your learning curves out there. The last thing is that there are some additional aids that you want to have on hand, because technology can have glitches sometimes. It's much more rare now, but when you're prepared, then you already will be able to just reach over and grab those things. So my toolkit that I have here sitting on my desk, I always have my iPad, and I have it on, I have a case that I can prop it up, so that's a little bit easier. I always have my stylus next to me, and then those other tech tools I was telling you about, right? Charger is also a great thing, because that's something you want to remind the kids to make sure things are charged before the session, because if it gets down to 1 or 2%, it's hard to, even once they've plugged it in, to get that charge. So either making sure it's charged before the session, or making sure there's a charger right next to them, or it's plugged in during the session, is really valuable and will save your session sometimes. Some other things that I always have nearby is my grapheme and morpheme card deck. Just like when I tutored in person, I still use the same thing. So my students have, each student has a box of cards, and I have their card deck here, right? That I go through. Their morpheme cards for things that they've learned are here. And so that's right here, and I'm showing them those on the screen. And again, the next part of this webinar is where you're going to get to see how I walk through the lesson and some different variations for how you can do each section of that lesson. Another thing that's great to have nearby is a dry erase board and markers. That's definitely for you, but also maybe for your students. Sometimes my students will have one nearby and they'll pick it up and write on it, because for some reason either they're just not dealing well with the tech, or the tech is having a little bit of an issue. I do have a couple students that sometimes seem to have extra anxiety. These are students that already have a lot of anxiety, and for some reason technology can kind of push their buttons. And so in that instance, if there's something that's kind of a glitch, it kind of ramps them up. And so what I found is I'll go, you know what, put your iPad off to the side, grab your dry erase marker, or grab your pencil and paper that you already have right there, because they know that these are tools that are good to have on hand. And let's just switch there and just use the video conferencing. If for some reason a tablet dies, or if for some reason the internet going out would affect your video as well, but for some reason your tablet isn't working or your online whiteboard isn't working, I have done complete lessons, and I know there are lots of people out there that do complete lessons just by holding up the cards or holding up paper that they're writing on. It's not as efficient, but you can save a session when something dies or something's going wrong by doing that. And the kids are pretty flexible and able to go with that. And sometimes it makes it a little bit more novel and they're like, oh, this is interesting. Look, I can do it on paper as well. Some other things to have on hand, and I'll show you this in the next piece, is Unifex cubes, syllable scoop cards, or any other manipulatives that the students are already familiar with from working with you online. Those are great for them to have online or for you to have online so you can show them those pieces in the camera. And again, like I said, this next piece, you're going to see some of that in action. I mentioned the pencil and paper. Also, I always keep a regular pen and my lesson plan right next to me. Okay, so this is what I'm marking on as I go. A lot of you have we all have different kinds of lesson plans, but I haven't gotten rid of that paper pencil piece because to me, it's just a lot easier to write on my paper lesson plan than to try and write on it on my iPad because I'm already using my iPad for that touch screen. So I personally keep that paper pencil lesson plan right next to me. And then the last thing that I didn't realize until I started working online so much is that being on the computer so much can actually really stress your eyes out. Now I have 20/20 vision. I just have a slight stigmatism. So these glasses actually just kind of correct for my stigmatism, but other than that, they are blue light blocking. So I really don't wear these glasses other than when I'm on the computer. But once I started wearing them, it was really evident to me how tired my eyes were getting working on the computer. Now these I did get from an eye doctor, so they are a prescription pair because of that astigmatism that I have. But my husband has bought a $10 pair off of Amazon and they work well as well. You can get blue light blocking glasses all sorts of places now, and they do really help your eyesight. And you'll notice, I think, at least for me, that they make it so that I'm able to work much longer and not feel as tired when I'm doing that. This is a mixed lesson, so do not think that this is a lesson that I would put in front of one student. What I'm showing you here with these different slides is how you can do your slides differently depending on your student's age level, their attention span. So sometimes they're cutesy because we have young kids that need those cutesy pieces, right? The cartoons. Sometimes they're not cutesy because they're older and they just need what's in front of them. So what you see right here is the dry erase board that Keely and I are working on. And this is Keely, by the way. And she is my partner. We work together. She tutors online as well. So this,
I've got this same thing as on my iPad here.
Yep, Keely has the exact same thing. We both have it on our iPad, so you can see it here. And I will go into how this tool works after you see what this looks like. If you do decide that this is the right tool for you. There's lots of different tools out there. So I don't want to bog you down with those details right now. So with an Orton Gillingham lesson, I always do a cover page. It makes it a lot easier for me to know that I did upload the correct student's information, right? So that's one of my little tips and tricks. So it says Keely, it tells me her lesson, the objective. For some of the slides, like I said, this is mixed, and the date today. All right, when I move the board, then it's going to move the board for the student as well. This is my handwriting drill. So the first thing we do is go ahead and Keely, can you do the first half of your cursive letters? And then go ahead and as you're doing that, make sure you're telling your hand what you're writing.
Okay. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M.
Very nice. Good job, Keely. Now, at any point when Keely was doing that, if she had had a problem, I could have stopped her and gone, wait a second, let's look at this L. Did your L go all the way out? Do we need to fix that? We're just showing you how this works interactively, but we can both be writing at the exact same time and it will live sync at the same time. The other good tip that I've learned in doing online tutoring here is you have a couple different sizes. So on your computer, Keely, if you can go ahead and on your computer touch the pen
Here.
there. Yep. So if you click on this pen, you have options to change the size. Keely, were you using a size 3 there?
I was. Yep.
Okay. So I tend to tell kids to use size 3 for cursive. It makes it a little less wiggly because we all know that when you work on a touch screen like this, your handwriting can get a little wiggly. So you saw there where she dragged it to make it a little bigger. You also have, and I'll explain all these tools after this, these little clippets of the video lesson, and I'll explain these tools a little bit more, but just letting you know that this is totally live syncing. I don't have to go back and forth giving her permission and then giving myself permission. The other good thing about working with handwriting here is that you can pinch. So with mine here, you see this is the size it popped up as, and I know you can't see the lines because, oh, there you can a little bit. A student, and our kids know how to do this, right, can always pinch and make these lines bigger. So if they need to make it a lot bigger to work because of some fine motor issues or anything like that, they can do that. They can pinch and make it smaller. If they ever get lost on a page, the best thing to do is to go back a page and come back, and then that usually recenters them and helps them find where
You want me to show that? Down at the bottom?
Yep, so down at the bottom, you see Keely is going back to the left to page 1 and then going back to page 2. And I'll explain to you later, I'm going to talk about this too. Each of these pages is a PowerPoint slide. We are creating this all in PowerPoint and then uploading it so I know exactly what's going to be on each page. So there's my handwriting example. Here's another page. And I'm willing to definitely share these templates. If anybody's interested in using these, you definitely don't have to. These are just things I've created and they evolve all the time. So here's another example of if, okay, so with Keely, let's go ahead and practice that L so it doesn't stop maybe right there. So I'm gonna switch to my pen and I'm gonna go ahead and go L, L, L. So we're doing trace, copy, cover, closed here. And you saw as I wrote, Keely saw it. Now, Keely, go ahead and trace my L's. Tell your hand what you're doing.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my L here. L, L, L.
Great job. Then go ahead and go down that center column, Keely. So we're doing copy at this point.
L, L, L.
Yep, perfect. Now, if you're sitting next to a student, a lot of the time, maybe you might have them fold their paper. You might put your hands over the paper. Online, I use this box tool, and it's right here on the left. And again, I'll go into all these tools later, and I just cover it up so the student has it covered. So Keely, go ahead and do your covered piece.
L.
And then I cover
L.
each one as they go.
L.
Perfect. Now you have a couple options here. Sometimes I'll just make a big box and say, okay, right here on the blue, close your eyes and show me your L's. But if I want to save that work, I will actually have the students use 2 fingers, drag that box up. And then sometimes if the kids aren't sure where they're going, I'll make a different colored box. So Keely, if you see that pink box down there.
Bring the pink box up.
Yep, can you drag with 2 fingers? Just push your fingers up till you get to that pink box. That's where you're going to have your eyes closed to practice your L.
All right. So, okay. L, L, L.
Very nice. All right. So we just did trace, copy, cover, close, and now I'm using a tool that's your undo tool. And what I'm able to do with that undo tool now is that I'm able to take those boxes off, and Keely can see all of her work right here. I can save all of that work as well, right? And so this allows the student to not feel like their work went away, and they can also pick their favorite L. So Keely, which was your favorite L that you did there? You want to circle?
Oh, let's see here. My favorite L, I'm going to choose a different color.
That's another thing the kids love to do is pick their different colors.
I think that might be my favorite L.
Yep, I would agree. That one's really great. You've got that nice little kind of smile coming off of it that's just right ready to go into your next word. All right, or next letter. So that's how we do handwriting on here. And it is a different skill set. You do want to teach students that this is different than writing on paper. We can't keep your hand down on there, or it is going to pop your screen apart to a different spot, or it'll make a big quick line across the thing. But that is one of the skills that we do need to have in today's just society in general, right? Being able to work on touch screens. A lot of different careers now are working on touch screens. So we just really are training them that yes, your handwriting will look a little bit different when you're on a touch screen here. And you have to work to keep your hand up off of that board a little bit. In some of the tips and tricks, I can talk to you about, oh, I just pulled out my earpiece. I can talk to you about some different stylus options. Some of my kids do have the Apple pencils, but that is definitely not at all required. But we do recommend a stylus. There's one that's on Amazon for like $15 that's good, and it works great for the kids. So I'll talk about that more. Moving on, so here's some more lines for handwriting if I wanted to work into that. And then the next thing we typically do is we go into our visual drill. I don't have a slide for visual drill because I go straight to my cards. So Keely, make sure you're looking here at your computer. What does this one say, Keely?
A.
Good job. Where does this go? The beginning, middle, or end of the word?
In the middle.
Yep. If it goes in the middle, can it go anywhere else in the word?
If it can go in the middle, can it go anywhere else in the word? It stays in the middle usually.
Stays in the middle usually. Sometimes it can go at the beginning as well though, right? Like aim and aid, yeah, beginning and middle. You got it. All right, what's this one gonna say?
Oh.
Oh, this one? Got it. This one?
Long spelling right after one short vowel.
You got it. So she already instantly knew. Now, I'm not telling you how to do your visual drill. We're not really going to change that at all because, you know, it's however you teach your visual drill. That's just how I teach it. But if she had an error, I would go then to a blending drill, which a lot of people also do as well. And that's where we get the kids to blend either nonsense words or something like that. When you're sitting next to a student, a lot of the time we'll do this maybe with a dry erase board or with cards and move them around. Can't do that as well. It's really hard to hold these cards up in front of the computer. It just makes it a little too difficult. So what I found to be easiest, and again, some other people might have other options, but is I go ahead and let's say she had missed maybe IGH, right? So she missed IGH, and I'm going to write it here on the board, and I'm going to say, Keely, what does this word say? This is a nonsense word.
Pite.
Pite. It does say pite. Good job. What if I change it to this? Now what does it say?
Spite.
Spite. You got it. Good job. Now I'm going to change something else. Keep your eyes on the board. What do you see now?
Speet.
It does say speet. And one last change. I'm going to change it to this. Now what does it say?
Spote.
Spote. Good job. So see how I'm just quickly using my eraser there, and or you can, if it was your last letter that you had just written, like I just wrote that, I could go undo, and just move quickly into another vowel team that would make sense there. So you can do that a couple different ways. I mean, if you feel like you can stick the things on a dry erase board and show it in the computer, that's option as well. Down here, I just keep track of which phonemic awareness skills or exercise the student is on. So this is an example of one of my lower students who's at G2. We're working on number 5 right now. They don't need to see anything because phonemic awareness is just working with sounds. However, we do sometimes need to help them error correct, or we sometimes need to help them, just give them manipulatives, right? So in order to do that, Keely, if you can highlight the square tool right there, and I'm going to put some squares on the screen here. I'm going to go with, so there's the square tool that I'm using, and I can make them whatever color I want. Okay, so there are some squares there. And so let's say, Keely, we're working on doing cat. So can you say cat?
Cat.
Okay, now Keely, if I change cat, if I change the a in cat to I, which one are you going to move?
See, I'm going to move the yellow. I'm going to move that. Okay.
You're going to move the yellow. So this is, again, something I would do when I'm in teaching it to students, getting them to make sure or error correcting if they're not hearing that sound. But did you see how she was able, she's the one that dragged the box.
I can actually show here on this. So you can drag using the point.
Yep. So you use that and you drag it around. So you can do a lot of different things. The only tip with those boxes is that you cannot put them in before you upload the PowerPoint. When you upload the PowerPoint, whatever is on those slides is kind of all considered one piece. So if you want anything to be draggable, once it's online, you have to go in and either put the screenshot or something in there, and then you are able to have students drag it around if it's a separate piece. But yeah, so we do boxes. They're pretty quick and easy for the students here. Moving right along, here's just some lines that we use for the auditory drill. Some people call this the what says drill as well. So here I would say, Keely, what says A? What are your A options? You've learned 4 of those.
Okay. A, hold on, I need to change my tool. Okay.
And all that happened there was she was still on that drag tool and it dragged the back, but we just switched back to that pencil.
A consonant E, A-I, A-Y.
Perfect. So typically we would do more of these, obviously, just giving you a feel of how this looks online though. And again, if there was an error or anything, I could write on there and help her fix anything on there with my stylus. I typically have 2 of these slides in here because we typically do at least 7 to 10 of those, building that strong foundation for spelling. Okay, so the next drill we typically do is review reading. Depending on your student's age and their attention, you're going to set this up in different ways probably. So this is the way that Keely has created. Keely has a very young student. And Keely, do you want to go ahead and explain what you do here with this for Liam?
Sure. So what I was finding, and he was having a hard time with spelling or sounding it out nice and smoothly. So for instance, for crayon, he might say but he wasn't really reading that word fluently as a row. So what I did is I would have him sound out each word. Sometimes then what I would do is I'd say, okay, now I'm going to jump Mario across the words. And so I would say cram, grub, crop, clip, glug. And then I'd ask him, now I want you to hop along. And that helped with his fluency, so he might have had maybe a different color. And he would go across then cram, grub, crop, clip, glug. So that seemed to really help him with fluently reading through that whole list of words after he sounded them all out.
And you can see here too, I mean, it's a super cute little Mario. Sometimes it's just little tiny things that'll keep the kids' attention, especially when they're young. And then also with this, you notice that Keely has color coded the letters there for him to continue to build that awareness of where those vowels are right now, because he is very young and having a lot of trouble. Here's another example of some make-believe words. Well, no, those aren't make-believes. Those are real words that Keely has, and there's Mario bouncing across them too. So you can get kind of cutesy and do things like that. When you have an older student that has trouble still reading, there you can turn some of these things into games. So one of them that I've found that's quick and easy here is to just use insert a table that's 3 by 3, and my words are here. You can do this a couple different ways. If the student is pretty decent at reading through 9 words like this, then you can have them go ahead and read through all of them and then play tic-tac-toe. If they're really maxed out, then you can just kind of guide them around and play tic-tac-toe at the same time if their attention span isn't really there. So for instance, for most of my students that I do this with, I would say, okay, Keely, can you go ahead and read your words? Just read through those words real quick.
Stung, sail, rink, away, latch, feed, juggle, seam, drive.
Perfect. So she got them all right. And then I'll say, okay, let's do a quick brain break reward, right? And so what we'll both do, and Keely can maybe do this on the computer. Yep, on the computer as well. So we both choose whatever our color is that we want. And then you see her there. She is clicking on the pen and she chose that second option, which is a highlighter. And then she made it as big as it could go. So then she'll pick whatever color she wants to be her color.
Let's see.
And then, okay, Keely, you get to go first. Where are you going to go?
Let's do juggle.
Great, juggle. I'm going to go with latch.
Stung.
Good job. How could you use stung in a sentence? How would you use stung?
The bee stung me.
Perfect. I'm going to block you with away. Run away from that bee.
Feed.
Feed. What vowel team is in feed?
E.
You got it. Good job. I'm going to go with sail. I will sail away.
I don't have a way to win this. Let's see.
You got it. I'll go with rink and
Nice. Drive.
drive. There you go. Another fun little tip that I do with my kids, and they seem to love it, is I typically do let them win at least one of the games if we do this. And then they think it's the greatest thing ever. This is just a silly thing. I'll put their initials, so K for Keely, and then I will switch to my pen and give them some confetti. So I go doop 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 doop. And I'll switch to another color, and they think it's the best thing ever. I'm just doing little dots on there, right? But it's just one of those little, it's like the stickers, right? We all love stickers. They like their little thing. You can do whatever you want. Some other tutors do. Sometimes I'll do dog kisses and pick up my dog and let her like put her nose near the camera. There's lots of different little things that just get the kids back on track. Now, again, we obviously have a lot of older students as well. I actually have students from 2nd grade all the way up till junior year in high school. So this is a much higher group of words, obviously, much more advanced students. So Keely, can you go ahead and read through these words?
Okay. Allowed, mucus, harpoon, knuckle, Milo.
Oh, wait a second. Okay, so let's check that one really quick. Can you go ahead and pinch and make your word bigger on your iPad and show me how you would split that word apart?
Okay.
So the first thing we label is
I want to make sure that's a little smaller.
Now, when a student is doing this again, this page, the words are about this size. It's so hard to get the glare off. Well,
Can you
it's
see on
like
mine? I don't know.
but there, see how she pinched and made that word very big so that now she has plenty of room to mark on there.
Okay. B, B, C, C.
Great. What animal split is this going to be?
That's a rabbit.
Mm-hmm. And what types of syllables do you have now?
So I have, that's a closed.
Mm-hmm.
And would this one be vowel team?
That is a vowel team. Great job, Keely. You're right. Now let's think about it. What does a vowel in a closed syllable say?
That would be, it's a short sound.
Yep. So what is your first syllable going to say there?
Mel.
There you go. So now what is your word?
Mellow.
You got it. Perfect. All right. So then I would have her continue going through that entire word list, come back and maybe ask her a question or draw a circle here to get her attention to reread that word one more time at the end for one more error correction. But you can see there, that was just an example of if the student makes a mistake, they can make that word as big as they need to so they can use all those coding tools to fix it. Okay. Moving right along, here's just an example of a quick sentence. And again, like I said, some of these are slides from very young students. Some of them are from middle-aged students. Some of these are from high school students. Just an example of, there's a sentence. It's just one slide with a sentence for her to read. Okay, now when we get into spelling, there's a lot of different ways that people do this. Some people, most of us know SOS, right? Where we're sounding it out using our fingers. I definitely still use that with most all of my kids online. That's one of the great reasons we have the camera in front of us. But we also tend to use a couple different tools, and we want our students to understand all of them. So we also use blocks, and we use this phoneme grapheme mapping paper. And this is actually from Letters. If anybody's been trained in Letters, Dr. Louisa Moats and Carol Tolman have this phoneme mapping graph paper, and teach how they do it. But it's just Elkonian boxes, and different people do it different ways. So again, don't do anything different, but this is just a couple different ways to really engage your students when you're online and not right next to them. So let's go ahead and do a few words here, Keely. So the first word we're going to do today is brain. What was the word you heard me say?
Brain.
Yep, show me your sounds.
Okay. B-R-A-N.
Perfect. How many sounds did you sound out?
4.
Okay, go ahead. So she's going to put one little dot at the bottom of each box.
3, 4.
And then she's going to tell her hand what she's writing as she puts the letters in there.
B-R-A-I-N.
Perfect. Good job. Next one is, let's do quit. Quit. What's the word?
Quit.
Mm-hmm. What are your sounds?
So, or is it qua? Wa?
There you go. You got it. Good job.
Okay, so
and that's what
4.
we see our kids often doing. And we've peppered in some mistakes here so you guys can see how we would correct that.
Okay. So if I did Q, U, I, T.
That is a good thinking, but do you still have a dot there?
I do.
You do still have a dot. So one of the things that we talk with our kids about is that QU is 2 sounds. So you're going to put a Q and then your U right next to each other, but they're 2 sounds, right?
Q,
and then the
U,
IT.
I, T.
And for my student, I wouldn't necessarily write it. I was just giving you the example as I did. write it. But yeah, so this is how I can go back and forth. She can do the one line through it as well. But it's just, I'm able to visually show her by writing on this dry erase board versus needing to sit right next to her to do it. So that's just an example of how you could do that. Some of the kids like to also then go ahead and write that whole word over here so they can read it there. Some of the kids are maxed out just by writing it once, and that's fine. They can read it off there. So one more time, Keely, what are these words that you wrote?
Brain and quit.
Got it. Perfect. Now we're going to show you another way using blocks, or really you could use lots of different manipulatives here to sound it out. So Keely's going to move something in front of her table. Sometimes the kids just lean their laptop or whatever they're working with down so we can see what
normally kids are able to lean it. Mine doesn't work very well that way, so never usually a problem.
This is just another example of how we're pulling those multi-sensory pieces in. So these are what you see Keely putting down. Keely, you want to show your syllable scoop cards there?
Okay.
And we have been trained by Karen Leopold again. So this
got
is
extras if I need them.
These are Karen's syllable scoop cards, but you may have seen different things other places. So what we're going to do is we'll do a 2-syllable word here. The 2-syllable word is trickle. What's the word, Keely?
Trickle.
Yep. How many syllables do you hear in trickle?
2.
Got it.
Trickle.
Yep. And so she's going to pull down 2 cards. And then she's going to show you how she sounds out. We typically use blue for our consonants, red for our vowels. White would be a silent E. Keely's silent.
The white. Black
Keely's,
for X.
and black is for X. Yep. So so go ahead, trickle. You can go ahead and sound that out.
Trickle. Okay. Oh.
Perfect. That's exactly what you would do. And then I'm going to move her. So if it's a longer word, I'm probably not going to use this. If it's multi-syllable, I'm probably not going to use this morpheme graphing paper. I do keep it in here though. So I keep extra slides in here for most of my students so that then if they are having trouble sounding something out and it's a shorter word, I can take them right here. And I can kind of bounce back and forth because it's a lot easier to just have it in there and skip the page than it is to need to go ahead and upload it again or put a new image in. So Keely has that. So then I'm going to go ahead and give her just some regular lines for her to write trickle on.
Trickle. Trickle.
Perfect. And with some of my students too, if they're not doing as well with those blocks in front of them, I might also train them to do the scoop right here on the screen, and then they would write in the scoop, right? So there's lots of different tools that we use here to help the kids sound things out and try to make sure that this is staying very multi-sensory and very visual for them as well. Moving right along, here's just a slide that I use for sight words. Yeah, you can put that off to the side there, Keely. So just a quick sight word check. I just have blanks here for them to write on. If I'm teaching a new sight word here, I've got the possibility for trace, copy, cover, close. If it's a sight word where I'm using a visual or a mnemonic, a lot of the time I'll put a little image of some sort maybe up here, like, oh, you lucky duck for would, should, could, right? Things like that. So you can always put those into your slides before you upload, and then they're there, just like the little Mario character or the little Mickey Mouse. Sometimes I'll put some of the resources that would be in their student notebook here on the iPad so that we have the ability to go back to that. So if a student's having trouble remembering something about a syllable type, I have this in here, but I'm not really doing anything with it unless they need it for error repair. This is my own little thing. Now, again, these images are Karen Leopold's. And these are her little images for her syllabication zoo. So this is for a younger student. She has so far caught 4 of the animals for her zoo. And so I make everybody has their own little syllabication zoo that stays on a slide the whole time. And they get really excited. We go on a safari, especially the young ones. Because what I've learned with doing online is you almost have to be a cartoon character sometimes, right, Keely? Yeah.
Yep.
You got to be creative with a lot of these things. So the syllabication zoo is just like a resource page for them, where if we need to go back to it or review it, it's there. But it also kind of makes them feel great because they see their zoo growing as they learn more of these divisions, right? So that's just what I have there. Oh, and another thing I've learned to do is hand motions. And I think Keely and I will start doing little tips and tricks here and there to share out. But one of the things I've really learned is to give them hand motions, even for things that in a lot of, like, I know a lot of people that are trained in Orton Gillingham already have a hand motion for short A and short E and different things like that. Sometimes I come up with new ones for other things. So I've got a monster rabbit, and the monster rabbit splits right between the consonants, right? But then when I teach them that's a regular rabbit. Then when I teach them the monster rabbit, I do a monster rabbit, and they love being able to do that little claw back at me. So I'll actually doodle another little ear on there, and one of my high schoolers actually calls it a Chernobyl rabbit. He said clearly it's had a nuclear accident and grown a 3rd ear. But that just also helps them remember that with that rabbit, right, you can split it a couple ways. I also do things like the tiger pounces right after the vowel, or consonant LE. I circle those 3 and I make a little turtle on my hand. So different little cutesy things like that. I'll probably put up a video for that at some point. Not right or wrong, just things that I found kind of get them moving versus just sitting there staring at me when I'm teaching these concepts. Keely already showed you how we would split this word when we did that error correction, so I'm not going to go into this one. But I do put the words for my syllabication. I typically do 2 to 4 words. I do put 1 word on a slide, and I make it much larger so that they don't even have to make it to zoom in. It's already really big, and they have plenty of space for them to go ahead and split these words and label them. Then we start getting into your direct instruction. Here is where you typically would show them a concept page, right? Well, here's my concept page. This is Karen Leopold's story for the most common long vowel spellings. And so today, I've got some slides right after this that show how I would maybe teach IGH. So IGH, we know Kilpatrick, there's a lot of work that he's done with phoneme grapheme mapping. It's a really hard concept to help our students understand, especially when you're trying to get them to visualize. So one thing I've started to kind of do, and again, take it or leave it, is I color code these. So there's green, yellow, and red, beginning, middle, and end. So when I teach night, or when I teach IGH, I will maybe start with a student and say, okay, Keely, our keyword for this is going to be night. And I might, for a student, I probably would have this covered up as well. Go ahead and cover that up before, so they aren't even seeing IGH right now. But I'm going to say we're going to learn a new vowel team. And this vowel team says I, and I want you to listen to see where you hear the I in the word. The first word is night. What are your sounds? Can you sound it out for me?
Okay. I.
Perfect. Where do you hear that I sound?
In the middle.
In the middle, you're right. So I let the students, they'll often put like an X in that middle box for night. Okay, so we did 1, but it's usually good to try 3 to see what's happening. Let's try another one. The next one is fight. What's the word?
Fight.
Yep. What do you hear?
I.
Yep. And make sure your hand faces you. And that's one thing to make sure with the kids when we're on camera. Yep. So where do you hear that I sound now?
In the middle.
It's in the middle as well. Let's do one last word. Bright. What's the word?
Bright.
Mm-hmm. So show me your sounds.
I.
Got it. Where do you hear that I sound?
In the middle.
In the middle. You got it. So where do you think this new I vowel team is going to go?
In the middle.
It's going to go in the middle. Did you notice this one actually also has a similar sound pretty much most of the time right after it? Night, light, bright. What do you hear at the end?
A T.
T. So a lot of the time this is going to have a T right after it for this vowel team. Okay, so then moving on, here is where I would start to let the students see it. Again, if you're not doing that phoneme grapheme mapping as much in the way that you teach, I'm not saying you need to do that or change the way you teach. I'm just showing you how I'm integrating this with the online tools. So again, Keely, can you read these words? And where do you see that I'm sorry, no, you're not reading these words. I'm reading these words. So Keely, I'm going to read these, and as I read them, you go ahead and underline the IGH. The first word is light. Where's the IGH?
In the middle.
In the middle. Night. Where's the IGH?
In the middle.
Yep. And the last one is flight. Where's that IGH?
In the middle.
You got it. And building on to our story, the story is we sail away to see the sea and what is this a picture of?
Night.
Night sky.
Night.
So let's visualize ourselves on that boat. Do you see that night sky all around you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think she's off on a vacation. It's supposed to snow in Kansas in the next day or two where she's at. So just keep picturing that boat, Keely.
I will, with the sun.
The sun cruise, although nobody's going on cruises right now, right? In case you didn't notice what today's date is, we are in that lockdown for the coronavirus. So hopefully everybody is staying nice and healthy. All right, so here's trace, copy, cover, closed. I'm not going to go into this again because you've seen how we do that online. But again, we can go IGH, night, IGH, night, IGH, night, and then she can trace mine, she can write on it and move forward, and I can cover with those blocks. Okay, moving right along. This one, I would just have her read through these words. I'm not going to have her do it and underline that vowel team that we're targeting, right? So we're targeting IGH here. Again, all we're doing to put these words here is creating tables. So this is a 5x2 table. If you need more words, you can make your table bigger. If you need less words, you make your table smaller. If a kid is maxed out, so again, Keely has a really young student that gets really maxed out, we're probably only going to show 4 words on each side, right? Because too much visual stimulation. Some kids, we can only do 1. But again, that's one of the strengths of being able to put these into slides is that you know how many words are going to show and exactly what's going to show to that student right at that time. And they don't get visually overwhelmed by anything else. We've already gone over how you do phoneme grapheme mapping here if you want to do that, or again, you can just use lines if that's what you use. And again, these are just lines. These are just slides that I made in PowerPoint. There's nothing super creative. I'm totally fine with sharing these as templates if you don't want to recreate the wheel, but you feel free to make your own if you want. Here is what I would do for a really young student. Just giving them a lot of lines because a lot of the time they're writing bigger, even if they're pinching and making it big. And then you see my cops down here for them to mark out after each sentence. Whereas with my older students, I'm able to do this typically. So I can get 2 sentences on the line with my older students or on the slide and then another slide for 2 as well, okay? So again, nothing super creative or anything. Here we're reading sentences. You can put as many sentences as you want up here. You can make the font a little bigger if you want. Again, you don't have to worry about that too much because the students can always pinch and make it bigger and smaller. Most of my font is at least a 28-point font, I believe, though. And when it's those bigger one words, I want to say that's in the 60s or 70s as far as size. Then as far as reading, here we have, this is decodable for one of our young students where we just screenshot this in. Some of my older students, though, are now no longer in decodable text, and they're working on some challenge texts like Ivy and Bean. This is an ebook, and what I do is I just screenshot it in for the time being, and then I just delete those slides out, so I'm not keeping the book. I'm just using it just like a library book there with the students. So that making sure that we're, protecting that material, not just keeping it, but it's there so that we can share it. And so this would be, I think, the last thing that I need to show probably. So here, this is the middle of Ivy and Bean. So a lot of us have been taught maybe to use a note card above your writing or the reading so that the student is only looking at that one line. Well, I can't do a note card here, but what I can do is I can do, again, a box. Okay, so here I've put a box. And Keely, and what I'm going to use is the drag tool to drag this box down as Keely's reading. So Keely, go ahead and we'll just read a few sentences here.
Bean tapped her fingers against the window, thinking Ivy would come to her rescue if she knew that Bean was imprisoned. Bean was sure somehow Bean let Ivy know what was going on. Then Ivy could help her escape. Hey, wait a minute. Bean felt an idea landing in her brain like an airplane.
Good job. You got it, Keely. Now, Keely reads a lot faster than a lot of my students are going to do, and you saw that there is a little bit of a lag when we drag this. So you might want to drop it right before the student's ready for you to drop it. And you don't have to do it, but it does help a lot of our students visually keep track of where they're at. It is a little bit of a playing thing, though, to make sure that it's moving with you the way you want it to. But I think that is, yep, that's pretty much everything. Now we're to the Undershirt of Freedom, which is the next chapter in Ivy and Bean. So yeah, I'll move on to describing more about the tools.
Okay, now we are to part 4, where if you liked what you just saw with that video and you go, hey, I really want to try using AWW app as my platform as well, I'm going to get into that more. I do want to thank Lynn Lamping. So last year, Lynn Lamping is a fellow in Oregon that I work with a lot, and she asked me to help her do a presentation for her trainees that were going through certified on how they could tutor online. And so we collaborated on pulling together some of this information. So she helped as well. So thanks again, Lynn. All right. So AWW, it stands for a web whiteboard app. It is an interactive online virtual whiteboard, which means it's just like writing on a whiteboard like you saw in that video, and it syncs up live. So as soon as I write, the student sees it, and as soon as they write, I see it. So we can both be writing on it at the exact same time, and that's one thing I really like about it. I don't have to switch back and forth as far as my who's in control of that piece. And we're both using a pen or a stylus, so it just feels like we're writing on a whiteboard. Those capabilities make it very collaborative, and it makes it a lot easier for me to not take up time out of my tutoring to do that other management piece. The real-time updates do work for participants as you're going, sometimes I'll have students that go, hey, I have an essay or I have a question on something like this. Can you help me out with it? And they are able, and I'll show you this tool, to actually take a picture of whatever they're doing, especially right now during this whole lockdown. I've got a couple of my students, the parents have asked me to help with some of their homework as well. And so what they can do is they can take a picture of their workbook page or their writing prompt or whatever they have in front of them and actually upload that picture right then. Or if, for instance, we get into a discussion and they aren't understanding something in reading comprehension because they don't have a visual, I can pull a screenshot really quick off of my computer and put that in there, and it will go ahead and sync up so they can see that as well. So you're not stuck with only the pieces that you've put on. You can also do those updates as well, and add things as you're going. Another thing is if I change the page, then they change the page as well. So they're moving along with me. I know they're not accidentally looking at a different page and not where I need them to be. Another benefit of AWW is that it runs directly in your web browser. My families, they don't have to download anything. Each session, I send an email with a new unique link for that specific session. They just open that link right before our session, click on it, it pops open in their browser, and they're ready to run. So nothing else needs to be downloaded for you or for them, and it's all saved online there as well. Yep, and so that's what the next bullet is about. All your student work is saved online. So I have hundreds of boards at this point because I have a lot of students and I've been doing this for a while, possibly thousands that are saved on there. However, I always like to have a backup just in case. So I will every once in a while go in and download those so that I do have a local copy just in case something were to happen. And so with that, you can download that and it saves it as a PDF. Again, I did mention earlier in the presentation too, if you are somebody who is working on your practicum with a fellow through the academy and you are still submitting those observations, that's also a really nice piece, because then you can just download that as your student work and send that to your fellow or your fellow in training for feedback. Since it's a little different now, right? Normally we would have sent them the pieces of paper that the students were working on. So now I'm going to go ahead and show you a basic tutorial and go through all the different tools and how I use them, and give you an idea of how you can go ahead and get started and hopefully pick this up and go really quickly with it. So enjoy this. All right, now we're to the part where if you're interested in learning more about how to use AWW app specifically, I'm going to go into these tools so that you know how to go ahead and just start things pretty smoothly. So when a student comes to a board that you have shared, they're going to have a pop-up like this. So they will get that unique link from you, they'll click on it, and then it will pop up with this screen, and they'll have this green button that says join shared board. They can change their name. I usually don't mention that to them. They don't really need to worry about it. Mine auto populates because I am logged in, so it has my name. So I click on join shared board. There will be a chat box over here on the right, you see, where if I want to, I can chat with whoever is in the screen, but I really don't use that with my student either. So typically we just both go ahead and hit X on that and don't need that whatsoever. Now, when I'm starting to create a board here, I'm going to go here at the top left, click on that arrow and click on Save Board. That saves my board and makes it so that I can name my board. So here you see I've got it highlighted. It says unnamed board. Instead, I'm going to make this my example lesson. Once I do that, it is saved, and you can see right up here, it tells me what I named the board as. If I was doing this as a student board, I will typically do initials. So let's say my student's name is, well, my name, Grace Sharma. So GS, and then I'll typically do the lesson name. So let's say this is my first lesson, and then what am I doing as my topic for this lesson. So right now I'm teaching you about an example lesson, but I might put in here, if it was a student, maybe I was teaching them, GS1, and maybe I was teaching them the CK rule. Okay, so that's how I keep these organized, so that then when I go back into my board repository, I can find that student work and pull it down and know what each one is. Or if for some reason I just need to get back into that link, it's labeled in a way that's easy for me to find. While we're up here looking at the top left corner, if you notice this AWW is green right now, that means that it is live syncing right now and everything's working great. That's usually the case. If at some point the student or you aren't seeing something live syncing and the other person says, oh, but I just wrote on there, and for some reason you don't see it pop up, if you look at this AWW on the left and it's gray, that means for some reason you've lost connection to the internet. And in order to fix it, all I typically do is have the student come up here to their address bar and hit this reload button. And again, I'm on an Apple product. It might look a little differently on a Windows product, I think. When they reload, it's going to pop up that screen like where they started at, and you're just going to do join shared board. And you can see there it went back to what I had originally saved this as, because I never changed that title fully. So this is GS1 example lesson. All right. There are other options when you click on this to duplicate, delete the board, rename it, open another saved board, create from a template, create a new board, manage participants, and delete all the pages. Honestly, I don't ever really use any of those if in this window. Typically, the only one that I'm really using here is I just want to save this board. I save it first so that I don't lose anything that I upload if there was anything going on with my internet. Looking at these tools, the next one up here, you see I've got it highlighted. This is your select tool. It kind of looks like a mouse. This is the one that is going to let you move things around when you're in here. So let me go ahead and get this, make this a populated board by going actually to the very bottom. This very bottom, it's a plus sign, and you can see when I hover over that, that says upload. If I click on it, it gives me a couple different options. This first option, it looks like a little mountain with a sun, is a picture. So this, again, at another point during the webinar, I mentioned sometimes the students might have something they have a question about in a book or a worksheet in front of them. This is where they would click on that, take a picture with the camera on their device, and then place that image in order to put it right there in the screen. And I'll show you how to do that in just a bit here. This is how you would upload a PDF. I used to do that when I first started, but I found it was a little bit clunkier, and sometimes it would cut off some of my images. So I stick with the PowerPoint option here. So here's my PowerPoint. I'm going to go straight to where I know I saved this on my desktop. Here's my example lesson PowerPoint. And this is the same one that you saw before when Keely and I were working together with her pretending to be a student. And again, if this chat box on the bottom right ever pops up and you don't want it, you can always hit the X. A lot of the time this will pop up when you first start. It is there so you can type to your other person maybe if you want to, but really and truly, I don't ever use this with the students. So I typically just keep it X'd out. If you ever do want it, it's down at the bottom right. Okay, so here you can see this is the board that Keely and I were working on that's uploaded now. Once it's uploaded, you'll see that AWW again. Again, when it is uploading, you'll see that green arrow circling, telling you it's working on uploading that deck. Down here at the bottom left, you can see how many pages uploaded, and this, if you're using the PowerPoint, is going to correspond to how many slides you have. So this particular deck has 40 slides or 40 pages in it. I am on page 1 of 40. Again, whenever I'm in this tool, if I or the student moves us to the next page, it's going to pull both of us to that next page. Okay, so going back to page 1 here, some of these other tools, this is the select tool. So if a student wants to move something around that I've put on the board, like those boxes you see in that example, they're going to use the select tool. So let's just show you how that works. This is the box tool. If I put a box here, and then I go up to my select tool, now I can drag this box wherever I want. You'll notice when I click on this, if I don't click off, I have options that pop up here as well. One of the options is to duplicate my box. So I can duplicate quickly if I want to have a lot of boxes that are the exact same size here, and then just drag them up wherever I want them. So that's one of the shortcuts that you can use. If you have one of these highlighted and you go, oh, I didn't really want that, this just deletes it. Here you can copy it again, you can paste it again, and this one you can kind of lock it so it's not draggable. I don't ever really use that though. Like I said, if I'm putting these boxes in here, I'm putting them in as digital manipulatives. And so I want to make sure that they aren't locked into the board. Because what you can see here is if I have the drag tool and I go down here to the actual slide, I can actually drag the actual background of the slide around. And sometimes the students will do that. You saw Keely do it at one point where she went, oop, I accidentally was still dragging things. And it's fine if they drag things around and you lose it or something like that. You can always go, no worries, just hit your undo button till it goes back to where it was. And they pick up on that pretty quickly. At first, it kind of surprises them, but then they get used to it and they know, wait, nope, I accidentally did that, and I'm going to hit the undo. Which brings me then to that next button here. This is your undo button. This is very valuable for a lot of things for you as a tutor. If at some point the kids, once the kids learn how to use this, sometimes they're really quick to want to just undo mistakes. And in Orton Gillingham, a lot of the time we want to keep that mistake and just do a line through it. So you just have to make sure you train them not to. And I don't typically have a big problem with that once I remind them, nope, it's okay to make a mistake. Just do that line just like if we were on a piece of paper. We're not going to take the time to erase, and we want to be able to show that, look, this is the correct way that you are going to do this. But undo is very valuable for teachers. The only thing I will say about undo is if I hit undo, it only does what I've done. So if a student does something, they have to be the one that hits undo. So sometimes I do have to say, oh, can you hit undo so that moves back or something like that. So they do know where this tool is. The next tool is one that the kids really like. This is your color palette. Here you can select the basic colors will already be here. And then you can actually go down here and hit plus. And the kids sometimes really like making their own custom color. So there I just made a custom color, and now it joins my palette. As you use these custom colors, it'll move the ones on the bottom left out. So you always have a group of custom colors down here, and then these are your basic colors that stay up here. So again, once I click on that color, it shows me here that that is the color my pen is going to write. The next one is my pen tool. So here you can see I'm on a pen, And I can choose to make this pen, leave it at size 1, which is going to give me something like this. Or I can go all the way up to size 7, which gives me pretty nice circles, but I typically don't write with that. Again, in that in the video you just watched, I explained that usually a size 3 is the best for cursive, I found, because it doesn't look extra thick, but it does make it so it's not quite as bumpy when you're writing. It makes the student feel a little bit more successful versus having that kind of wiggle that we tend to have when we're doing digital writing. The next tool here says it's called a marker, but I actually consider it a highlighter because when you use it, it then lets you see whatever's behind it. And again, you can change that size and make it, make it whichever size is best. I'm using my mouse here, and so it's not, with my mouse, it's not working as well as when I'm on my tablet. On my tablet, I would have just written across. You see, I did it there once, just going through this word. So again, that's your highlighter. Then you have 3 other tools here. I don't typically encourage the students or really point to these for the students because sometimes they can get tangled up with these. This one is an arrow and it's like a line. So when I do that line, again, I'm using my desktop mouse here instead of but there it kind of gives you let me make that smaller so you can tell what it's doing. Oops, go back to the arrow. It gives you a line that then has an arrow at the end, if you see that. So sometimes the kids will use this if they're trying to point at something, but I really don't use this one that much because sometimes then they want to write their letters with it and you have all these little arrowheads in your letters. It's not that great. But it could be useful for some things. Maybe you want to use it. The next one is just a line arrow. So it's the same thing, but it's going to do a straight line for you. For sure, it's not going to be all wiggly. I could see where that one would be useful. I don't typically use it that often myself though. And this last one is just creating really straight lines wherever you're at. So if there's some reason that you want to make some straight lines, maybe to underline something, you can use that line and it's going to be perfectly straight. Again, since I'm on my tablet, I don't necessarily switch to this. A lot of the time I'll just freehand it with this pen tool. The next one you have here is the eraser tool. Now, the only one that is definitely off limits for my students is this black eraser that you see highlighted right now. This is one of the newer updates that AWW came out with. And what it does is whatever you click, it takes that entire thing away. So there you saw it got rid of my entire slide in the back here. If I click it, all my lines are gone. It's not really great to use that then. Unless you as a tutor realize, oh, I need a blank space to write here and I'm just going to get rid of the lines really quickly so I can write without whatever I've got there because you're switching your instruction really quickly. So sometimes I will use it for that, but the students I've told do not really get to use it because otherwise, if they're not really wanting to read something or they get a little frustrated, sometimes they might want to try and erase and I'll go, nope, please put the words back. And we're not using that black eraser. However, if we go back to this first page and I go to this first eraser, sometimes this one is useful. Again, in Orton Gillingham, we typically discourage the use of an eraser, so I don't even bring up the idea of there being an eraser in here unless there's some reason, and usually there's not a big reason for it. But if you do need an eraser for some reason, this is where it is. And again, you see there, I erase through whatever is on the board. So anything on the board, I can erase through. If I accidentally erase something, I can go undo, undo, right? One interesting thing about this eraser tool is if I do erase through things, and then I drag. So if a student were to erase something and not be able to understand when you were saying undo that and so that the eraser goes away, I do have the ability to drag out from behind that erasing mark, which can come in handy because, you know, sometimes if kids are getting a little frustrated or something, they might want to erase something, but if you can pull that font out, then they realize, oh, that isn't going to work. And usually it only takes 1 or 2 times for them to realize that's not the best choice for their education. Okay, so I can undo and undo again. And like I said, I can undo pretty much limitlessly and get rid of basically everything you've seen me do on this page. So there I went back to a clean board. If they refresh the board, I think sometimes that makes it so they can no longer undo beyond that refresh. So just something to keep in mind. But again, hopefully you're not having to use this undo too often. In here you have, in the eraser, you have a couple other tools. You have some scissors where you can kind of cut pieces out of something. I really don't use that very often. And then you have a clear button. Again, I don't really use that often either. And in case you didn't notice, you can change that eraser size from very small to very big, depending on if you're wanting to erase something big or small. Moving to the next tool here, you see this is where we've got some instant shapes that we can use. There's a rectangle that is not filled if I want to highlight something or get their attention around that. This is that box that you saw me working with before. And again, whatever color I have chosen up here, now you see that's what my box is moving and working in. We also have circles. Sometimes this one's useful for like consonantly circle 3. The kids do need to learn how to use this circle to drag it open to make the size they want. And a lot of the time I don't really mess with that either so much, but it is an option if you need it. And then there's a filled in circle. So again, you can kind of play with the thickness of the lines on these. So if I'm going to this box, you see that one I squared around Keeley to begin with, and here's one with the thicker lines. So lots of different options there. This next one I typically don't use because I'm really focusing on my students using their handwriting and being as similar to writing on a piece of paper as possible. But it is possible if a student needs to that they can type. So hello, my name is ... The reason I don't typically use this though is what you just see here. If they have something like Grammarly working or even without Grammarly, so this is my Grammarly that's popped up that's told me I need punctuation. But even without Grammarly, if they're doing this on an iPad and they select that text, that type option, it will actually pop up with a digital a keyboard right there at the bottom of their screen. And what I find is there's a little bit of a predictive text, like the predictive text with your texting on your phone. And so my concern is that they're going to see what they're looking for versus actually sounding out words, on top of not using that tactile piece of writing. So it's very rare for me to go, yeah, it's okay to use that type. The other thing though, if for some reason you do think that works best for you, you can do it. Just keep in mind that if they type something like this, until they click off of it somewhere else, you won't see it. So as long as I had my flashing cursor there, anybody else in this board couldn't see that until I click off. So they might say, no, I did type such and such, or I spelled it, and you're not seeing it, you're not seeing it. It's because you have to click off of that box and then it will populate. So that's a tool I typically don't really use, but I could see places where it might be useful, especially if you've got some kids that have a lot of issues with their handwriting and they're getting stressed out, it might be something that is a good quick modification there. This other tool down here is a post-it tool. Again, I don't really use this one. You can use this and then type things. The problem is if they use this post-it, and sometimes they get really excited and they want to put post-its on, if they hit undo or delete, whatever they wrote on that post-it is gone. It's just like they ripped it off and threw it in their trash, and there's no way to put it back on. So it could be fun and cutesy for some different things maybe. Maybe you might use it to cover something up and then pull it off. I don't know. I typically just stick with the boxes for that. Again, like I mentioned, you can put some pictures in here. So if you were to go in here, and let's see, I will go to my photos. And here is the Academy of Orton Gillingham logo, right? There's the logo. So if I wanted to place that, I would click right there, and you see how it put it on the screen, but it's not placed yet because this image is, this place image button is here, or the X. If I decide that's not what I want to put in there, I'm going to click that X. If it is what I want to put, then I'll hit place image, but only once I've put it where I want it. So if I wanted to put this right up here maybe, I would put it there and then place the image. Once I hit place the image, you see that green circle going again on the top left, telling me it is uploading that image, and now it has just popped up for my student to see. So I do have the option of putting images up, and sometimes I'll quickly, if a student's like, I don't understand, what do you mean by a mole or something like that in a story, I could quickly pull a picture of the animal, a mole, up, take a quick screenshot and paste it in here so they can see it. When you do put something in like this, you can go to that drag tool and move it around. So sometimes my students will be really excited about something. They'll say, I want to show you a picture real quick, and they'll screenshot. Maybe one of my students in particular really likes video games, and he'll screenshot some new tool that he's gotten in his video game, put a picture up, and I'll go, oh, that's great, that's nice, and then maybe drag it off to the side so it's not right over my label here for when I want to go back and maybe save this. All right, I'm going to drag my screen right over here to the left now to show you some tools that are hidden over here on the right. Again, on the bottom right, this is that text, that chatting tool. I really don't use that one very often, but you can, if a student clicks it, it'll pop open, and then just tell them to hit that X to close it up again. These tools over here are a little bit more useful if you are working on a desktop on this, but again, I'm using this to be able to use it as a touch screen with a stylus, so I typically don't use these tools as much, because then you can pinch and make things bigger or pull them together to make them smaller, but this will make it bigger, and this will make it smaller. Okay, this one pops it out so you don't see those edges, or you can bring it back. Really, when you're on your iPad, you're not going to see those edges so much. I don't, at least. And so this one's not, again, not a tool you typically use that often. This the hand helps you drag the whole board around. So sometimes it is possible that a student will maybe make this teeny tiny and then lose it, right? Just getting used to it or something, or you know, they accidentally go like this and it just goes down to a tiny little thing and they lose it. You can really get lost. See how I just pulled the board that way and I lost that totally, and it can be really frustrating and you aren't really sure, how do I find this again, what do I do? The quickest, easiest thing to do is to come to the bottom left, go right and then left again, and it'll pull it back into focus for you. If they've done some writing somewhere off in the side, then it might be that this comes. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if I made this really small, a kid accidentally makes it really small and they can't find it. And while they're trying to find it, they make a mark over here, right? I will, as the tutor, go ahead and take them a page forward and a page back. Now you see I found that other part of the board, but because they had written over here too, it keeps both pieces there. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. Again, you can always drag it over, the student can, and then make it bigger. But typically I just say, wait a second, let me go to a page forward and a page back, and I'll bring you back. Again, looking over here, we've got this eye tool. It kind of just shows you where you're looking, and I don't ever really use that tool. Students ask me sometimes what it's for, and I haven't really figured out exactly the best use for that in tutoring, so we just kind of leave that one alone. Over here, this is where you get into your account, where you log out, and then there's other integrations that you can work on, such as I mentioned in the last piece, Google Classroom, things like that. There's more information here, frequently asked questions. So if there's something I didn't touch on, or if there's something that didn't really make sense, then you can definitely go here and find a lot more information. And then this board, this one right here, is how I share the board. So when I started this, I came in, the first thing I did was I came in and I saved the board, right? I gave it a title. The very next thing I would do is I would go down here and I would upload my PDF, and I showed you how I did that. So once my PDF is uploaded, I go to invite, and then I make sure everyone can edit when I share the board, okay? So you can share a board and people can only view it, but you wanna make sure they can edit. That's where that live syncing works. You can use a couple different options here where you invite via email, you embed it in a frame. I typically just use this first one. There's the board link. I hit copy board link, or you can Control C on your keyboard. You do also have the option of doing it as a QR code, and looks like you can even use some social media pieces here. Like I said, since I'm just using this for tutoring, I'm just really putting it out there with this one link and just sending that link to either just my student or my student and their parent. Just a couple last things to talk about. If I go to my account, here's a lot of different options, places to work as well. The main one here, so they are beta testing an assignment where you can send out assignments. Since I don't typically send out assignments, I haven't tested that one, but that one might be a really great tool for teachers or tutors that are giving homework assignments. There's some other different things here. I don't work with that often, but the board repository is where I definitely work. So this is my board repository. When I click on that, it comes up with a dashboard. And then down here, you'll see this is all my different boards that have been shared. And you can see there are places like this one. This student was sad that day, so I put a quick screenshot in of a puppy to try and cheer her up, right? Here's one that sometimes they'll get into the board and they'll kind of link or doodle before I get in there. They think that's fun. Or sometimes here, they'll write me a little note. Here she wrote, "Hello, Miss Grace," with a little donut. So you can see though, the way I save all of my student boards is with their initial, the number, and what I'm teaching them that day. If I want to go to a board, then I'm going to click on this and then click on open board, or I can share a copy, or I can delete a board, which I don't typically do. You can also search your boards up here on the right. So if I'm looking, for example, for one of my students, There's his initials. Here you see all of his different work we've done together where and what I've worked on with him. So I can quickly go back to that board and work in that board, open it back up, share that link again if I need to or anything. So those are all my boards that I've created. If somebody has shared a board with you, you can click on the shared with me. Nobody's shared boards with me, so that one's empty for me. Anything else up here? These are just other places where you can look at information about how to work with the tool and different options. All right, I hope that was helpful and it clarified what these tools are and some of those steps for starting to use this tutorial. Just a little bit more information about AWW app, if you're interested in using it, is it does have a nominal fee. So there is a free option, or you can do a licensed option. If you're in education, if you're a teacher or you're working as a school, you can get it for $9 a month as a single teacher. And then it's a different, there's some different quoting going on if you're a school of 30 users or more. But here it talks about all those different pieces you get with that. As a teacher, you get unlimited premium boards. So I don't have to worry about, have I filled all my memory? You get unlimited participants. So when I train people live, like in a certified course or something like that, I'm able to send the link to everybody in that room. And I've had 30 to 45 people in the link at the exact same time, all writing at the exact same time. And it perfectly syncs with everyone. You do have the ability to download the PDF without a watermark. There are other options where it does have that. It just has a little watermark that says AWW app on the background, but it doesn't interfere if you do want to go with that free version. You do have the ability to upload and download PDFs or PowerPoints. I find that the PowerPoints are a little bit cleaner for me, and with the PDF, sometimes it kind of cuts some of my text off. I have to be a little bit more careful. So I typically stick with that PowerPoint for uploading. You also don't have ads when you pay that $9 a month, which is definitely worth it for me. On the free version, I think, I haven't had the free version for a long time, but I believe that there are some ads down at the bottom of the screen for the student, and those can get really distracting, and we know our kids don't need any additional distractions. So for me, the $9 a month is definitely worth it. Although I would say check out their website, because last time I had checked, there was either 1 or 2 months trial period that you could do free and still get all of these. So go ahead and try it, and just check with your students to make sure that that app or those ads aren't down there distracting them. You do also have email support, where if something's not working right or it's glitching at all, you can email them, and they are very responsive. They are in a country somewhere overseas from the United States, so their time response typically seems to be, maybe it could be during the middle of the night. They might not hear back during that exact day, but they are very quick. I've been very impressed with how quickly they respond and help out whenever I have an issue at all, which isn't very often at all. Again, if you're a teacher, you also have the opportunity to use it as a Google Classroom integration, which I don't use Google Classroom, but I know a lot of teachers do. And you have all of those things as well. If you are a school that is looking to do this during this lockdown period, you just also would have a school admin account, and now you have call support, which is a little bit higher. You can just give them a call instead of shooting them an email. But like I said, that email, they're pretty quick with that as well. So if you are not tied in with a school, or you don't have a school email account to go through the educational piece, then you have a few different options here as well. There is, again, a free option that gives you basic tools. You do have that board sharing, basic chat, which you saw in that video down on the bottom, but you do also have those ads. So I would say, for the price of 2 cups of coffee in a month, it is definitely worth it to me to pay, if you're an educator, $9 a month, or here a personal, if you're personal but don't have a .edu or a school account, $10 a month. That $10 a month, again, gives you pretty much everything that the educator version has, those unlimited boards, those advanced tools, and no ads to distract your students, the ability to save all of those up online, and that quick email support. If you get to the point where you're more of an organization like Keely and I, and we're working with different tutors, and it makes sense to you need maybe 10 accounts, then you can go to an organizational account, which is $75 a month. You have those 10 member accounts that include all of that other stuff with no ads and that additional call support. And if you're really working a big business of some sort that wants to use this, but you're not necessarily a school, again, they do have some different customized plans for you, where you can call and talk to them, and there you can get a dedicated IP address and on-premises options as well. But I would say most of the people watching this webinar maybe aren't in that boat. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was very informative. I tried my best to try and pull things together. Like I said, I am in no way saying that I have all the answers, but I am saying that I've been doing this for many years, and I've learned to evolve with the kids. I've learned to evolve with different tools. I'm continuing to evolve and learn, so I would love to hear what you guys are doing, what other ideas you have. Like I said, just recently I saw where someone was able to download in Zoom and use all of those foundation tiles. So I'm looking, how can I do that? And different things like that. How can I integrate even more options for my students so that I can individualize it or make it even more interactive? So again, look, I would love to hear what you're doing. What I'm going to do is my website, empoweredreaders.com. You can email me here, and you see that email address on the screen, in order to ask me any questions or anything. I'm also going to try and put up some forums, and then other things I'm going to try and do is put up a way to share with you all the different online tools that I'm seeing coming out that you can use during this time. Again, not just specified for Orton Gillingham, but for all of the educators, because we are in a very unique situation here, and I want to try and help everybody as much as possible. So again, if you hope you really enjoyed it. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact me, and have a wonderful day.